What is going to happen in the 2025 real estate market, specifically in Seattle? That is the question on everybody's mind. Stay tuned. Today, we're going to go through the 5 predictions that the Seattle Times is making about the 2025 real estate market. Hey there, thanks for tuning in. Before you get started on this video, comment below, do you think prices are going to go up or down in 2025? I want to know exactly what you think and what you predict about the 2025 real estate market. Okay, so everybody is starting out the new year. Happy New Year, wondering what's going to happen in the real estate market in 2025. That's the big question, and every year we make a prediction and we try to figure out what will happen, but to be honest, we don't really know. And these are just a fun way to think about what might happen over the coming year, and I'm going to try to shed a little bit of light on what I think will actually happen. So today we're reviewing the article 5 predictions for the Seattle area real estate market in 2025 by the Seattle Times. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about 2024. Of course, the market was down. There were a lot of homes for sale, but the interest rate was a big factor in people being able to buy and sell their home. The Seattle Times acknowledges this, right? There was a lot of fluctuation in that interest rate. It came down into the 6s, but at some point it was also close to 8%, and that really halted the market. There is something called the lock-in effect. If you haven't heard of it before, it's when homeowners don't want to sell their home because they have such a great interest rate currently that they don't want to get rid of that because they know if they go buy a new home that they're going to have a much higher interest rate. Now, this impacted people, especially in Seattle, if they bought during COVID with a really low 2 or 3% home interest rate. And so that was a big factor in this market for the past year. But will that be a factor going forward? Let's take a little bit of a look. So if you haven't guessed yet, put in the comments right now, do you think home prices will go down or up in 2025? So number 1 from the Seattle Times, they say home prices will continue to climb. So they acknowledge first and foremost that it's not going to get easier to afford a home in Seattle. Really, it is very difficult. The people who can often afford a home are mostly tech workers or people who have a lot of equity in their current home. But to afford a single family home in Seattle proper is really quite expensive. And if you're a first-time buyer, it's definitely expensive. There will be more people who opt for condos as entry into the market because those are often a little bit lower in price and you can get some more space for what you're actually buying. Now, the average price in Seattle for a single family home is in the 900,000s, and that is very close to $1 million. That means that you have to essentially be able to afford $1 million in your home in order to purchase in the Seattle market. So that does make it a little bit unobtainable for a lot of people. Now, during COVID, home prices were growing at a rate of around 20% for single family homes. We definitely do not expect to see that. Seattle Times is predicting that Seattle area homes could climb about 4 to 5% in 2025, and that's according to the Windermere principal economist, Jeff Tucker. Now, that sounds pretty accurate to me. You know, as we look at trends in the real estate market, both nationally and in Seattle specifically, we do see that a rate of growth around 4 to 5%, slightly above inflation, is pretty normal for most real estate markets. Now, a lot of times Seattle is a little bit ahead of the national average in terms of growth because we don't have as many houses as we do people coming to the area. And that's another thing to note. Seattle continues to grow. So a lot of people are still moving to Seattle, which makes it a popular place to purchase a home. Now, Seattle Times specifically calls out that places like Tacoma, Renton, Burien, Des Moines, and Kent, they're all going to become an area where first-time buyers can enter the market because they're slightly more affordable than the Seattle-specific region. Number 2 on the list from Seattle Times, and make sure you stay tuned for all 5 of these, is that mortgage rates will hover around 6 to 6.5%. Now, this, as we mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is a big indication of what's going to happen in the market because it had such a big impact in 2024. Now, in 2024, Seattle Times says the mortgage rate mortgage rates averaged a high of 7.2% in May and settled at 6.6 by mid-December. Right now, we're a little bit over 7% at the time of this recording in 2025. So all of this is to say that no one can predict the mortgage interest rate. So mortgage rates are different than the Fed rate, although they are impacted by what the Fed rate does. The most closely you can follow the mortgage rates is by what happens in the 10-year Treasury yield and what's going on in the economy generally. Now, Seattle Times says economists nearly unanimously expect rates to hover around 6% range next year. That's a big range of a full entire point. That has a lot of impact on how much buyers can afford when they go to purchase in terms of their monthly payment. The difference between 6.5 and 7% in your interest rate can be honestly thousands of dollars in your monthly payment when you go to purchase that home. And so if you are a home seller in 2025, you need to keep this in mind because that's a big impact and something that a lot of first-time home buyers focus on very specifically is how much is my monthly payment going to be. And so you have to keep that in mind as you're selling your home. Now, the National Association of Realtors chief economist Lawrence Yun projects that a new normal will be around 6%. The chief economist at Realtor.com expects an average of 6.3. Wells Fargo is forecasting rates will fall to 6.4. And then the Windermere economist projects 6.5. This is really all over the board. To be honest, we can't project interest rates. They have fluctuated a lot throughout 2024. What I would predict is that what will happen is interest rates hopefully will come down into the 6 range, but you'll see a spurt of activity every time those rates come down. And what I mean by that is when we saw the rates lower in 2024, about 2 weeks after the rates lowered, we saw an increase in the number of homes that went for sale. And specifically on our team, we definitely saw that where rates would come down and we would see more buyers become active or more buyers ready to get into that home that they had seen or been looking at. And so this is probably going to continue into 2025, where we see that the market will fluctuate a lot and we'll see buyers decide when to get into the market based on the rate more so than other factors that they can't control. Now, we do see still a lot of people purchasing and selling for life events such as divorce, had a baby, need more space, those sorts of things. But the interest rate is going to be the second biggest lever in terms of the market exploding or not exploding in 2025. Okay, number 3. Now this is one that we don't deal with a lot, but rents are going to remain high but slow to rise. And so we see this impact us a little bit tangentially because if rents rise, sometimes we do see more buyers enter the market because they think, hey, if my rent is going up, why not look at purchasing if I have the capital to do so because I can have the same monthly payment but maybe have a larger home or have something that I actually own and I'm putting equity into as opposed to giving my money to a landlord. It may not feel like it, Seattle Times says, to renters, but rents across the city are not on a dramatic incline. Rents were basically flat for 2024 and they're expected to stay flat for 2025. That could mean fewer buyers coming into the market for purchasing. Seattle apartment rents climbed less than 0.5% over 2024, according to data from Apartment List. And the reason that rents are not climbing is there has been an influx of newly built apartments in Seattle that is expected to continue into this year, 2025. About 13,000 apartments are under construction in Seattle, and many of those are on track to hit the market in 2025. So that additional supply means that rents could stay steady or even go down a little bit. They're not saying that it will go down, but it is relieving a lot of pressure for renters and for apartments that already exist in terms of increasing their prices. So the other thing to know as we look to the future is that the number of permits for apartment towers has gone down. So compared to 2023, the number is down about 10% in the Seattle area. And so that means that there are going to be fewer apartments coming online after this coming year, because there are fewer permits being pulled, which means into the future there's going to be fewer apartment buildings built and available for renters. So if Seattle continues to grow, apartment permits do not continue to grow, or apartments do not continue to come online as available for renters, that could mean that we will see rents incline again starting around 2026, because if those 13,000 that are under construction right now get filled up and there's not a lot more coming online, that means that there's going to be a little bit more demand, and that could increase the prices. Now, when we look at Seattle versus the east side rents rose a lot more. So rents rose anywhere from 3% all the way to 5% in Bellevue specifically, whereas on the Seattle side, they were just capped at around 3% rise in rents. And the median 3-bedroom single-family home that was rented was about $3,600 in 2024. Let's move on to number 4. Now, this has to do all about corporate building space in downtown Seattle. Seattle Times says that office market woes will continue. The office market obviously got hit a lot by COVID and the pandemic. So the number of people working in downtown Seattle is still at about 56% of where it was before the pandemic, even though it has risen since 2023. So the number of people coming back to the office has gone up, but it's definitely still about half of what we saw before the pandemic. The demand for office space from tech companies, Seattle Times says, is still pretty lackluster. And then a lot of office building repayments on loans are struggling currently in Seattle. So even in the midst of this, a lot of companies are still encouraging people to come back to the office. In 2025, we may see that leasing continues to gain momentum, and we see a lot more people go into leases because companies are calling their people back to the office. So we have Amazon's return to office. We're seeing more and more companies have a return to office in major cities. And so we are seeing people either move back into the office or commute back to the office or lose their jobs. And so we'll see how this trend continues. It will be interesting to see if people are willing to come back to the office 5 days a week or even 3 to 4 days a week, or if they are wanting something different and then they move on to a different job where they can work remotely. So this could change the landscape not only of downtown leasing space, but it really could change the landscape of where people live. So during COVID, we saw a big rush to suburbs. We saw people wanting even more space. We saw them wanting offices in their home. We saw them wanting more bedrooms for accommodating that space for other family members if they were moving in with people who were part of their COVID bubble, that sort of thing. So it will be interesting to see if we see people downsize or relocate to be closer to the office in 2025. Because of these changes in the office culture. Now, number 5, this is sort of a no-brainer, and it has always been something in Seattle. Debate continues over building new housing. Of course, this has always been an issue in Seattle. We need more housing because we have people moving to the area. That said, they're working on the One Seattle plan, which increases the density of Seattle. It allows single-family home lots of 5,000 square feet to accommodate even more living space. This is not something new. This has been going on all of 2024. If you haven't already checked out my videos about the One Seattle draft plan, be sure to go there and check out what's happening with One Seattle. There are some people in Seattle lobbying against this in certain neighborhoods because they want to maintain their space and their land. They don't want developers to come in and build right next to their backyard 6 units that will house more people. So it is a controversial debate. I'm curious, what do you think about the debate? Do you want more dense housing? Do you want it only in certain areas but not in a neighborhood you live in? What do you think about the housing debate in Seattle and density? Put your comments below and let me know what you think about what should happen. That, on top of the fact that incoming President Donald Trump is promising deregulations and tax cuts, which could be welcomed by developers. That's called out in the article here. And that could change the landscape of building. And so we may see even more apartment permits coming to market, more apartment permits pulled. We might see more developers start building homes, but what does that do in terms of increasing the price of goods and raw materials that they're using? So there's a lot of different factors that could change with the new administration as well. But overall, those are the 5 predictions that the Seattle Times has about the housing market in Seattle. What do you think? Do you think prices are going to rise even more, or do you think they'll actually go down in 2025? And where do you think the interest rate will land in 2025? If you've made it this far, put your prediction below in the comments and let me know what you think about the 2025 Seattle housing market. I want to hear your thoughts and hear what you think will happen with these predictions. And we'll get back together later in 2025 and see, were these correct or were these incorrect? Will 2025 be a different year for real estate in the Seattle market, or will we see remnants of 2024 coming back through? Thanks for tuning in. If you are like other people that we know and who have reached out to us on YouTube and you're thinking about buying or selling, it's great to get started in this new year with a free consultation. We get on a quick Zoom call, we talk through your needs and your real estate goals, and then make a plan that's right for you. So if you're thinking about that in this new year, be sure to reach out. You can call, email, or text us to set up an appointment, and we'll get on that Zoom call. And it's no obligation, it's completely free, and we'll talk through your needs and goals, and then we'll make a plan that suits you if it's right to work together. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.